Most of my substantive careers was actually in social housing, working for local authorities and housing associations, and I then had the opportunity to lead setting up of a New Deal for Communities initiative in Brighton. And it was that actually changed a lot of my thinking about how services integrate and partnerships work together, services work together. And from that I went to work on a consultancy basis for the Neighbourhood Renewal Unit, helping them to set up their national programme on neighbourhood management. And it was kind of natural to move into the Neighbourhood Renewal Advisor role, which had still a lot of work around neighbourhood management, both in terms of partnerships that were developed and local authorities who were thinking about how do we go about this, but of course drawing on my experience elsewhere and working with partnerships. A lot of work that came through that in terms of LSPs, local strategic partnerships that were being set up and were struggling with some of the agenda issues, and also just about how folk actually work together in terms of delivering things. So that's the kind of background. I think it's really critical to have an understanding of what you think that you're reasonable at, and in particular what you don't know. And be very clear on that, because there will be assumptions by people that you're going to meet with and you're going to work with that may be very different from what your skill base and your experience base is. So I think you need to make some sort of assessment on that. Equally, I think that when you get into an assignment, it's on the basis of a brief that's being commissioned. Very often that brief, different people have different views about what that means and what their expectations are in terms of achievement and outcomes and all the rest of it. So it's very, very important for anybody new going into it that they're clear and they work with the partners that they're going to be working with in terms of thinking about what does this mean, what does it involve, and they understand the time frame and what the outcomes are. Get that right is absolutely critical, I would say.
Is there a difference between an advisor and a consultant?
Well, there is, and I think most people's experience that folk are going to be working with will be with consultants rather than advisors. That said, the fact that I think that you're coming in and they're not actually making a direct contribution does alter the relationship, but you need to be careful that you're actually working alongside people to help them think through problems rather than going in there and doing a discrete piece of work for them around a particular issue. And it's a balance to be struck, but you need to be very careful about how you do that, how you work that through with folk. Over time, when people are used to it, they understand what a local improvement advisor does, as they did for the Neighbourhood Renewal Advisor, as distinct from a consultant. But initially, you need to be very clear on that. I think that what really is important, I'd say to folk, is what we were able to develop through the Neighbourhood Renewal Advisor Forum was actually a lot of connections, a lot of folk that you could work with or you could pick their brains and their experience on. And I think it's really important as you move into when you move into this new arrangement with new people coming, that actually there is a process for doing that. And people have got to invest in it personally, not just the REAPs doing it for themselves. Equally, I think there is a different relationship. Previously, the Neighbourhood Renewal Advisors were often commissioned via government officers. They're not going to be commissioned by government officers under this new regime. So that will change how people perceive you and see you. So understanding that and thinking about it is going to be quite important.
Well, I can see that some of the things will probably be more or less the same. It's an advisor role than a straight consultancy role. And you have the nature of the relationships you might have on the ground might be very similar. A lot of the commissioning of neighbourhood renewal advisors was from government offices, and clearly they're no longer such a key player in this arrangement. So we're not sure about, well, I'm not sure at least, what is going to be the kind of different nature of relationships, particularly on the commissioning side. And it's complicated because whilst all the 9 government offices were different to a degree, that was more around personalities, the regional improvement and efficiency partnerships are differently set up and at different stages of development. So for instance, the West Midlands one seems to be pretty well developed, and I know that certainly in some of the other regions they've barely got off the ground. So there will be a change in that, and I think for those of us who were neighbourhood renewal advisors, that will be one of the things that we'll still be trying to puzzle out. The experience was we did have that kind of evaluation, but it was in place, but it was rarely exercised. And it was of some value, but I guess one of the things is whether people want to see you again is one of the big things. And sometimes you're going into difficult situations where you're not meant to be anybody's special friend. And clearly you do form relationships, but it's not always appropriate. Sometimes it's appropriate for you to go and they need to move on, depending on what the nature of the relationship is, or the assignment is rather. And sometimes you have I've got long-standing relationships with some partnerships which have been going on for 5, 6, maybe even years, maybe even longer, and you come back periodically to work with them. Some relationships you're in, you do a quick piece of work and then you're gone. Some relationships you're coming in and working quite intensively with them for 4, 5, 6 months, maybe a bit longer, and then you're gone because they need to be on a journey and you're appropriate, to be on that part of the journey for them, and then you need to go. So I think that's also one of the things that you have to learn is to let go. When the Neighbourhood Renewal Advisors were set up, there were some big events. Not very often, maybe once a year, and it's very good to see people and you exchange information and you get to know people. As an assignment manager, which is a sort of managing Neighbourhood Renewal Advisor, we used to meet a much smaller group of us, maybe 15 to 20, every 2 or 3 months for a day. And that was hugely beneficial, I think, for everybody, because we could exchange views, experiences, do some learning, do that with our CLG colleagues and some of the government office colleagues. Quite a lot of investment in both sides, really, from that. But I think without that, certainly some of the less experienced advisors will struggle.